All right, welcome back to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We're fortunate every week to be joined by the radio play-by-play voice of both the Cincinnati Bearcats and the Cincinnati Bengals, Mr. Dan Hoard. Dan, you're gearing up for another big weekend, double dipping now. You'll be doing this every week for the next 10, 11, 12 weeks maybe. Are you getting on that 6 o'clock flight going down to Dallas tomorrow night? Does that still run on Saturday nights?
5:59 direct flight, American Airlines. You know your travel schedules, Tom Brenneman. No, it couldn't be much better for me. Noon kicks on Saturday really helped me. It's going to be a little bit hairier next week when Cincinnati plays a home game against Indiana, 3:30 or 4. We don't know the start time yet. And then the Bearcats are in the Meadowlands the next day to take on the Jets. I had to come up with a creative way to get there next week, but maybe we can talk about that next week.
Well, tell me, because, you have to plan this stuff out long in advance. Because there are only going to be a handful of flights in some of these places you're going to be, if even that many. As you look at the schedule off the top of your head, maybe I'm catching you off guard here, what's your worst travel fear weekend coming up this year where you say to yourself, man, it's going to be tough?
You really can't plan in advance because in college football, those start times don't come out in many instances until 13 days before the game. And that was the case with Indiana. That start time did not come out until this past Monday. So I couldn't plan in advance. You can look at flights and see what might be able to work. And had it been a noon game, it would have been easy. But it's going to be 3:30 or 4. You'd love to be able to fly to New York or New Jersey on Saturday night, but there are no flights from Cincinnati that are going to get there. And I hate to fly the morning of a 1 o'clock game. I will only do it if there are about 3 or 4 flights that get me there on time. Otherwise, UC's been great about it. If I have to miss the occasional game, I can. So next week, after the UC Indiana game, I'm driving to Indianapolis. Got a one-way car rental. Driving to Indianapolis. I'll crash at a hotel close to the airport for a few hours. There are hourly flights from Indianapolis to Newark on Sunday morning beginning at 6:30 a.m. So I always book the first one. They say that the first flight out is reliable because the plane is usually there. So, knock on wood, everything works out. But there are multiple backups in case that 6:30 a.m. flight is problematic.
There are certain places and back in my days traveling all the time in football, there are just certain places I get so uptight. I used to get, because I'm a very uptight traveler. In fact, my wife has already told me that when our son graduates from high school and we're empty nesters, that she loves to travel and she's not traveling with me. But I used to get so uptight about but there are only a couple of places where I'd get so worried about making it. And Newark is one of them for sure. Chicago being another, and the times you have to go to Los Angeles, there weren't many offered out there to begin with. But good luck.
Thank you.
All right. We had Paul Daugherty on a little while ago, Dan, and he brought up a great question that is, you see Miami still a rivalry because it's become so one-sided in the Bearcats' favor. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it hasn't been a competitive rivalry in recent years. Cincinnati has won 15 in a row. But yes, it's still a rivalry for Miami fans. This is a huge game and a chance to end that streak and a chance to beat the bigger school with a bigger football program. So I think it's still a rivalry. And obviously, being the voice of the Bearcats, I don't mind that they've won 15 straight. It's been enjoyable for me. But if you look back during those 15 consecutive wins, there have been games that Miami not only could have won, but should have won. If you think of Luke Fickell's first year as the Cincinnati head coach, Miami had that game in the bag. If not for a comedy of errors late in the game by the Redhawks, they end the streak. So to me, it's still a rivalry. I guess it would be a better rivalry maybe for some if the games were more competitive and Miami was winning a few of them. But to me, it's still a rivalry and still worthy of playing.
Yeah, it's been going on for a long time. And in a world where we seem to be erasing traditions, long-time traditions in really any form or fashion through all walks of society, I think it's still a good thing. UC and Miami playing football. This goes back 130 years. We had Chuck Martin on the program yesterday. And Dan, your eyes have been open to this world because you're around the UC program in both football and basketball, and that's this whole transfer portal thing. And, he's making the comment that last year, 2 years ago, they saw Ben Bryant as a backup at Cincinnati. Last year, they faced him as a starter inside the Mid-American Conference. In that game, Ivan Pace picks him off, right? And now Evan Pace, forgive me. And now all of a sudden, Pace is here at UC, Bryant's back at UC, and now they face Miami tomorrow.
Yeah, the transfer portal, the way it works now, is difficult for Miami and schools in the MAC and leagues smaller than that, because now it's really easy for guys to do what's always been known as up transferring, going from a smaller school to a larger school. Back in the day, you had to sit out a year. That discouraged a lot of guys from doing it. It wasn't quite as prevalent, but now it's going to be very common, and that's going to be tough on the Miamis of the world. It's not as big a problem for Cincinnati, particularly going into the Big 12. There are only so many programs that would be considered bigger, but it is really tough for schools at that level when they have a great player that they deserve credit for, a diamond in the rough maybe in recruiting, or somebody that they helped get a lot better. That guy reaches a certain level, and then they lose him to a bigger school. And if you're a fan of a school like Miami or somebody in the MAC or whatever, that is tough. I think that is one of the negative consequences of allowing basically free agency and transferring.
Going into this game, much was made last week in the rout of Kennesaw State. Much was made about Bryant played very well. Not that he played poorly down in Arkansas. We rehashed that and so on and so forth. But he looked sharp. Evan Prater came in and did some very good things. Took him on a 92-yard touchdown drive. He had the 44-yard run for a touchdown, showing off the athleticism we saw going back to his days at Wyoming. You're down there. You talk to Coach Fickell every single week. Is there any reason to believe this is a start of any kind of quarterback controversy at UC?
I don't think that it's the start of a controversy, but I do wonder if now they're going to find ways to get Evan into games. Maybe it's a series every half. Maybe it's certain game situations where they throw him out there. He's a weapon, and I don't think you can fully juggle two quarterbacks successfully, but I think there have been plenty of schools over the years that have found ways to get a really dynamic second quarterback into games and have a positive impact on your team. So I don't know exactly what that might look like, but Evan Prater played so well last week that I imagine it is strongly being considered. How can we get this guy on the field a little bit more than we have in the first two games?
As far as a run game, and it's a crowded backfield back there with some very talented guys, do you suspect, and look, Luke Fickell in many regards loves old school, if you can run it down their throat, and keep doing it until they stop it. Do you suspect we see the run game start to get cranked up as the competition now starts to get stronger and stronger moving forward into conference play?
I think it's actually been pretty good the first couple of weeks, but I think the one thing that Luke Fickell would like to do based on his history is identify his main guy, and they haven't really done that yet. Ryan Montgomery is out. He injured his ribs. He was the starter in week one against Arkansas, so he's still out. And then they've had three other guys that they've been rotating in there. Chuck McClelland, who's overcome 2 torn ACLs. He looks to have all of his speed back and has performed well. Corey Kiner, we're all excited about the former Mr. Football out of Roger Bacon. And then Miles Montgomery, who had a 76-yard touchdown run last week. So they have none of those guys has separated himself above the pack yet. And I do think that Luke Fickell would like to have a guy that he feels he can rely on to be the quote-unquote bell cow guy in that backfield.
Okay, let's shift gears now to – I'll ask you this at the end. Let's shift gears to the Bengals. I made the comment with Doc a little while ago. I don't know if you agree with this, but we've given the stat before, and you know the stat. Going back to 1990, teams that start 0-2, only 12% of them make the postseason. Now we're in a 17-game schedule. Maybe that changes it a little bit moving forward when we have more information and more years to judge it by. I would maintain, however, all things considered, especially no Dak Prescott. Even with Dak Prescott, I think the Bengals are a better team. I think they got to win this game, Danny. What do you think?
Well, as you said, especially without Dak Prescott, when you have the opportunity to go to Dallas, where you were a 2 point underdog, and now find yourself a 7 point favorite because the starting quarterback is out and Cooper Rush is in, you've got to win that game, especially when you let one slip through your fingertips at home the previous week because your long snapper got hurt. So, yeah, I would agree. I think they've got to go to Dallas and take care of business on Sunday.
Speaking of the long snapper thing, I give the Bengals so much credit through the years, and Duke Tobin, and I don't care how big or how small compared to other teams their scouting department is. But look, anybody and his brother could have picked up Adamitis. This guy was voted the best long snapper in college football last year, the Patrick Manley Award, if I'm not mistaken. First team All-American, all that kind of thing. Some people might have rolled their eyes when you sign this guy as an undrafted free agent or whatever the case may be. Now, we're going to find out. It's his first NFL game. But as far as just trying to find the guy who was thought to be the best at that job in college football last year, I give him a lot of credit.
I do too, and thank heavens they did it because he was waiting in the wings on the practice squad to come in for a situation like this, and sure enough, it happens in week 2. Now, here's what you have to keep in mind, Tom. You're right. A lot of teams wanted to sign Cal Adamitis because he was the best long snapper in college football last year. Why did he sign with the Bengals? Well, he saw a possible opportunity. Clark Harris turned 38 during training camp. He's not going to be doing this forever. Cal Adamitis was told he would be given the opportunity to win the job in training camp. He was given that chance, and Clark Harris ultimately retained his starting job. So Cal saw that there could be a good chance in Cincinnati, and I'm sure he didn't think it was going to be because of torn biceps in week 1, but here's his opportunity. He's a very good long snapper. I think his snaps will be great. The question with Adamitis versus Clark Harris is the size of the man. Because Cal Adamitis is about 30 pounds lighter than Clark Harris, who actually was drafted as a tight end by the Green Bay Packers. So now Cal has to hold up in the middle of the line on field goals and PATs when he gets that big push from 330-pound guys trying to knock him backward toward the long snapper. That is going to be the potential issue for him. It's not going to be snapping the ball. He'll be great at that.
It's a very, very good point. T. Higgins, we don't know necessarily what's going on with him personally. He missed practice yesterday, not because of being in concussion protocol, we're told. It was for a personal issue. We certainly hope that everything's okay with him and his family. As far as taking that part of it out, if he comes back to practice today and he's still in the concussion protocol, what do you think his chances are of playing this weekend?
I honestly don't know, Tom. He was limited at practice on Wednesday, wasn't in attendance at all yesterday because of the personal issue. I do think he will be back today, and I guess we'll have to wait and see what he's listed on the injury report today to have any sense of if he'll be cleared by Sunday's game. If he's not, they showed in the second half against the Steelers, they've got enough weapons to be okay without him. You'd love to have him. He's the best number 2 receiver in the NFL, in my opinion. But with Tyler Boyd, Hayden Hurst, who had a great debut, and obviously the super freak alien that is Jamar Chase, they'll be okay offensively if they don't have T for one more week.
That you make that point about Chase, and I just sat there. And look, you broadcast every Bengals game the guy's ever played in his 1-year career, and now starting his second year. But this guy is really something else. And to think at this time last year, Danny, and you were hearing this all the time when you do your radio show and the Bengals show, what were we talking about this time a year ago? All the drops that he had in the preseason last year. And now all of a sudden, look, there's probably an argument to be made on player A, B, C, and D. I don't know how, if you had one receiver to pick in the NFL today and you were starting a team, I think you'd be out of your mind to take anybody except for Jamar Chase. You agree with that?
I do agree with that, especially when you factor in his age, because he's still only 22. We know about the physical gifts that he has. We saw it last year, the strength, the speed, the hands, as it turned out. Once training camp was over, he caught everything. But a couple of things really stood out in week one in his performance against the Steelers. Number one, endurance. He played every snap, which is hard to do as a wide receiver when you're sprinting down the field on every play. They had 100 snaps when you include penalties, so that in and of itself was incredible. He worked with a track coach in the offseason. It wasn't to get faster, it was to improve his endurance, and that certainly paid off. And the other thing that really stood out, and he doesn't get enough credit for this, is the smarts. Once T. Higgins went out, he lined up at every spot they've got, and that's not easy to do. Think about how difficult that is, to know exactly what your responsibility is at every wide receiver spot in a game where you have 100 plays offensively. He's smart, he's tough, he's fast, he's physical, he's fantastic. And I'm with you. If I could have my choice of any young receiver in the NFL, he's my guy.
Well, and Dan, when Peter King came into town during the preseason and wrote, some great stuff, used to work, of course, here in Cincinnati when he got his start after coming out of Ohio University. I had to get in that plug for Ohio University. But he wrote about Chase the Grinder. And I remember when I was doing the NFL for years, Odell Beckham Jr., believe it or not, was thought of as that similar kind of guy. Where now he was more flamboyant off the field than Chase has been. We understand that. But as far as showing up early, working out, staying late, trying to get better every single day, Chase is that kind of guy. So everything you just said, all true. But I love the grinder part of this guy, at least from what I read and what I hear. I'm sure you've heard similar stories about this guy, right?
Well, I've seen it. And last year, when he was struggling in training camp and could not catch the ball, there were two reasons why I thought it was not going to be a problem. Number one, he didn't have a history of it at LSU. He dropped a total of 5 passes, I believe, in the 2 years that he played at LSU. Secondly, last year, so I'm not talking this year, I'm talking about last year, his rookie year in training camp, I have never seen a wide receiver in the years that I've been doing Bengals games catch more passes off the jugs gun after practice. And I thought last year, well, he's doing it because he's struggling. He feels like he needs the extra work. As it turns out, that's not it at all. That's his routine. He did it this year. He was the last guy out there catching balls off the jugs machine almost every day. That's the difference. That's the difference how you go from being star to the very best in the game. And he's got that kind of work ethic.
All right, before I let you get out of here, the one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know you got to know him very well and get close to him last week, I forgot to ask you. I just thought it was so fantastic that Bob Huggins finally got inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. There is no coach, I mean, outside of the John Woodens and all the national championships and that kind of thing, but I'm not sure there's another coach who is more deserving of this induction into the Hall of Fame.
I was thrilled. I joke often that on my tombstone someday, hopefully not anytime soon, it's going to list the year of my passing, and then there will be a little asterisk underneath that will say, would have lived 5 years longer if not for his friendship with Bob Huggins. Because when Hugs was here and I was doing the games, there were many late nights spent with our mutual friend, Chuck Meshock, having a few cocktails, telling stories. And I consider Bob Huggins and Dave Lapham to be the two best storytellers I've ever met in my life. Their catalog is deep. They've got great punchlines, and they tell their stories extremely well. So I'm grateful just to have been in his company for those years and to have had a front row seat to see how great of a coach he is. The numbers speak for themselves. He's got more than 900 wins. I think he's 4th all time. If I'm not mistaken, 2 trips to the Final Four, would have had a national championship, in my opinion, if Kenyon Martin, didn't break his leg. So he's a Hall of Famer. I'm thrilled for him. I know what it means to him. And, he's still coaching so hopefully he'll still get a national championship at some point.
I just wish that there were more people out there, and I haven't been with him as frequently as you have, but had a chance to be around him quite a bit. When I was doing the games years ago, you were at 19, and I was working doing the games for Channel 19, and I just wish there were more people nationally that knew him the way you've had the chance to know him, and me in limited times have gotten to know him. Because I remember one of the two or three of the guys on a Fox football crew I worked with for years and years worked at CBS. And they had left CBS like a lot of people did when Fox started in '94, and they moved from CBS to Fox. And they were doing the NCAA tournament every year. And the 1 year after the Final Four year, when Carolina plays UC in the, if I recall, the Elite Eight that year, when UC was trying to get back to the Final Four for a second straight year. And they were talking about, trying to get Bob Huggins, these guys on the crew, to come in and do an interview. And they made him wait because Dean Smith was 20 or 30 or 40 minutes late for his interview. And Hugs didn't like it. And they were like turned off that Huggins didn't like that he had to wait around for Dean Smith. I'm like, look, he's got his time, and maybe he doesn't handle it like somebody else might handle it, but there's a lot to like about Bob Huggins as a guy.
There sure is. I don't really know anybody that knows Hugs that doesn't like him. To know him is to love him. He's very charismatic. Like I said, the greatest storyteller ever. And it was awesome to be around those teams. Cincinnati was ranked number one in the country a couple of times when I was involved in the broadcast. And like I said, they would have won it all if not for Kenyon's injury in 2000. But to see him at practice, to see the relationships that he has with his players, they love him. There's a reverence for Bob Huggins among his former players that I don't know that you see with many coaches. And that's probably, the biggest reason why he's worthy of being a Hall of Famer. If you talk to those guys and how he's changed their lives in addition to, forming great teams and making them better as basketball players, that's a pretty good tribute to the man.
There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. All right, Danny, safe travels on that 5:59 p flight after a noon kick and getting down there to Big D. I'm sure you're staying at some, 5-star hotel with a big suite, and there'll be red M&Ms or maybe orange and black M&Ms in your room once you arrive there, I'm sure.
The Bengals do stay in very nice hotels, I'm not going to lie. So that'll be nice. And, those fancy hotels, the food is always available late. Yes. So if my flight is late or whatever, I'll be able to get to that hotel, and they'll still have something available at the hotel bar for me to eat, which is good.
Absolutely. That is key. No doubt about it. Danny, safe travels. Godspeed ahead, my friend. Thanks for the time, and we'll catch up with you hopefully after a couple of victories for Cincinnati teams over the weekend.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tom.
All right, Dan Hoard. Always great to have him on.